Well, good morning, everyone. We might get started. My name is Bernard Phillip. I'm the Australian ambassador to Sweden, Latvia and Finland, based here in Stockholm. And so I really wanted to thank everybody for joining us here this morning, or in the case of Anthony joining us from Sydney, it's I think late afternoon, early evening in Australia. So we really appreciate everyone coming along today. I think we've got a great program ahead of us. And hopefully this can serve as an opportunity to talk about improving business connections between Australia and Latvia and supporting companies to seize some of those opportunities. I'd really like to thank the Latvian Chamber of Commerce, the Latvian Investment and Development Agency and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for partnering with us on this event. And as I say, I think it will enable a good discussion about doing business in Australia, the benefits of a comprehensive and ambitious free trade agreement between Australia and the European Union. And we're also keen to hear from Latvian officials and Latvian business in particular to get your perspective on some of these opportunities. What I would say at the outset is that Australia greatly values our relationship with Latvia, and we are keen to build a closer partnership. As you know, we've for a long time had a very close people-to-people relationship, and the Australians of Latvian origin make a tremendous contribution to Australia across many different areas. So I think we've got that strong foundation to build upon. We also have, I think, shared interests and values across many areas. I discussed this recently with the Director General of Trade, who will hear from shortly, that Australia and Latvia, I think, share views on the importance of strengthening the multilateral system, of working together in the World Trade Organization, in the OECD and at the UN to make sure that despite the challenges of the pandemic, economies remain outward looking and open to trade with the rest of the world. And we also are keen to work with Latvia more broadly in the multilateral system. We note your upcoming bid to be a member of the UN Security Council, and we look forward to working with you in the multilateral system. I'd also mention that we do see real opportunities to grow trade and investment links with Latvia. You'll hear from my colleagues Juliana and Anthony about some of the initiatives underway to grow those links, but we recognise you as a very outward-looking country with a very skilled, educated workforce, and also a country that has real digital strengths. And so we do see some opportunities, even in this difficult period, to really reduce the tyranny of distance that sometimes gets between Australia and our European partners with the digital technology. I think there really is scope to strengthen those links now. And finally, at some point, we very much welcome Latvia being able to open an embassy in Canberra, which I think would really give a strong support to the relationship also. I should also mention that we're joined here today by Australia's Honorary Consul in Riga, Mr. Toby Moore. So it's great to have Toby with us, and he's certainly a great representative of Australia in Latvia, in addition to our coverage from the embassy here. So with that, by way of introduction, I'd like to turn to my colleague, Mr. Juris Stalmistārs, the Director General, Trade and Economic Relations and Development Cooperation in Latvia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and very much look forward to hearing your perspective, drawing on both knowledge in your current position, but also your deep experience working at the European Union level.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Very good morning to everybody. It's really a pleasure to join the efforts with our Australian friends and organize such a webinar. I think it's really good timing for such an event. Despite all the challenges, definitely I think it's our mutual interest, as Ambassador already mentioned, to join forces to really improve the business conditions, to work together on a global challenges. And I think this is exactly what we are, I think, going to do in a weeks and months and years to come. But let me briefly focus on on a topic of the trade relations with Australia. I think we can look from the both angles. Latvia's trade relations with Australia and the EU, and of course, when it comes to the EU, Australia is an important partner. We definitely know that for Australia, the EU market is much more important when it comes to trade and investment. But nevertheless, I think definitely there is ambition of the EU to also have a modern, fit for the future comprehensive trade agreement, and that's what we are currently doing, both as I think as the governments and also I think as also the businesses to contribute to this very important process of modernizing our trade relations. As we look at the current trade regime, it's really managed by our cooperation agreement concluded back in 2008, and I think really a lot of developments has happened, and we need to upgrade our trade relations, also taking into account the fact that Australia has numerous free trade agreements with other major trading partners. I think this is one of our major interests, to put our Latvian and other European businesses on equal footing with those other Australia's trading partners. So our ultimate goal is really to provide for the improved market access to Australia markets, to improve access to public procurements, to improve the situation when it comes also to the non-tariff barriers. I think there is a broad range of issues the modern trade agreements provide for, especially also when it comes to dispute settlement, when it comes to the services, also sustainable development. I think it's really currently one of our priorities, how we can green our economies, how we can promote green growth, how we can develop digital transformation. I think I can continue on and on about mentioning which are really areas we need to improve in our FTA with Australia. But I think the message here is that we are progressing well. So we are 2 years in this negotiations. I think we have a good prospects to wrap up the negotiations soon, probably not by the end of the year. I think that was the initial ambition, but I think looking realistically, we are aiming next year. What is for the business? And I think that's the key question. For us, as I mentioned, we are looking for the improved market access. Although our major export products, which are, for instance, the equipment for transmitting voice, image, or data, or our furniture, or plywood, our canned fish, or other stuff we are exporting to Australia, or our services we provide in IT sector or in other areas. Definitely there are some barriers, also tariff barriers. They are not big ones, usually some 5%, but still I think the key is to improve the area of non-tariff barriers, to improve the market access to public procurement market. And I think the special attention would be also paid to the small and medium-sized enterprises. I think this is one of the must-have for us in any modern trade agreement, to have a special attention to the SMEs, how they can benefit from those trade agreements. And I think it's very clear that governments conclude various trade agreements, but the key question is how we implement them, how both sides enforce. And as we know, nowadays a lot of trade tensions, trade wars are really the consequences of bad implementation or circumvention, etc. So I think the key here is really to provide for the also best way to implement those trade agreements. And this is what also we are thinking also at the EU level, also by creating new portals, new databases. And I can also use the opportunity to draw also business attention and also not just our Latvian business attention, but I think Australian business attention to the just this week launched the new portal, which is very, I think, useful for any exporter or importer to get the information on the all import tariffs, rules of origin, all different kind of information. So we can definitely also share and put on our websites the link. It's called Access to Markets. So and the link will be to the also European Commission web page. So I think this is a great tool. Also how to improve the transparency, how to improve also the understanding of how we can benefit from these trade agreements. What I can also would like to mention is that apart from improving this legal framework at the EU level, it's very important also to continue improve our bilateral legal basis between Latvia and Australia. I think all businesses value the existence of double taxation agreements. I think this is one of our interests to have such a double taxation convention between Latvia and Australia, especially taking into account the fact that a lot of EU countries have such an agreement, and there are few member states, including Latvia, which are not on equal footing with other EU countries. So this is, I think, our aim to get rid of this way of differences, how the Latvian and, for instance, German or French business can operate in Australia when it comes to taxation issues. But I think we can do more in other areas, but let's leave that for the businesses. I think the key is really stick to the positive trade agenda to improve our relations in economic, but I think not only in trade and economic area, but also in all aspects. And you mentioned the Latvian embassy in Australia. This is in our plans for sure, but of course we also very much value the network of our honorary consuls activities our diaspora is doing in Australia to promote. And of course I think it's very useful when also those Latvian export champions like SAF Tehnika, Latvijas Finieris, so they also, I think, can help other companies to work with Australia. And I think the question is not only about doing business in Australia, but doing business with Australia. And with this wish to really contribute to this process, I once again thank you very much for this event.
Well, thanks very much, Director General, for those remarks. I think they set the scene in a brilliant way for the discussion to come. Just to pick up very briefly on a couple of points, you mentioned Australia's free trade agreements in our region in Asia Pacific. I think that is one opportunity that Australia presents, given our economic links and integration into the Asia Pacific, the most dynamic region of the world economically in many ways, and would certainly encourage Latvian companies to think about the opportunities that region presents, and Australia as a platform for that. On the green technology and climate policy, I just wanted to say that we share Latvia's interest in moving ahead very aggressively in our efforts to reduce emissions. There is a massive effort underway on this in Australia at the moment, driven by very high levels of investment in green technology, and I think they really do present opportunities to strengthen the relationship between Australia and all of our European partners. And finally, on the double taxation agreement, look, thanks again for mentioning that, and happy to discuss that through the course of the discussion. We will take that back to our counterparts in Australia. We welcome the feedback that we receive on this, and rest assured that we do appreciate the importance of this from Latvia's perspective, and we hope we're able to move forward on this at some point also. But thank you again, Director General. Could I now turn to Mr. Philippe Tolbergs of the Foreign Trade Promotion Department in the Latvia Investment and Development Agency. Very much look forward to hearing your perspective, and thanks again for partnering with us on this event.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Ambassador and distinguished guests. Good day, dear colleagues and entrepreneurs, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I really would like to thank to Australian Embassy and all institutions for organizing this webinar. And I'm really glad that together we can foster cooperation between Latvia and Australia. I'm glad also for such an interest from Latvian companies too. And actually I take it stride forward as an indication that as an agency we have to take actions for bringing business cooperation with Australia to the next level. I hope that this information today provided by experts could encourage many companies to decide for next steps. Actually, with this, I mean really purposeful actions like market research for industries and companies, or cooperation with industry experts for helping Latvian companies to enter market, or also stronger cooperation with Latvian diaspora in Australia, maybe not just in culture and history, but also in field of business. I would really like to thank especially to representatives of companies, Latvijas Finieris and SAF Tehnika, that agreed to share their experience entering Australian market. As we all know, far markets sometimes are not the easy ones, but we need such companies that can explore the business potential on the other side of equator and to be as a good example to others. I think everything is still ahead and in our hands. So there is a saying, the iron should be forged while hot. So we need to set ambitious targets and make the most of opportunities. So we as an export development agency are ready to assist and help companies. So please contact us. I hope that really this webinar will lay strong foundation to continue good initiatives in the future in various industries. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for that very good perspective. I agree. It's very heartening at the strong interest that we've had in this webinar, and hopefully it is something that we can build upon going forward. I very much agree that the Latvian community and diaspora in Australia can play a strong role in connecting business, not just the contribution they make on the cultural side. So I think that is a real asset that our two countries have in driving the relationship. I should say too that we appreciate the fact that we are having this webinar in English and drawing upon all the superb English language and language skills of Latvians. But Latvian is also spoken widely in Australia, so there is that connection as well. So thank you again, Philippe. I'd now like to turn to my colleague Juliana Nahm, who's a counsellor at the Australian Mission to the European Union in Brussels, and really plays a key role in driving forward Australia's trade engagement with the EU, including through the Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement that's under negotiation. So Juliana, thanks very much for joining us. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning from Brussels. Thank you, Ambassador, for the introduction, and thank you very much to our Latvian colleagues for inviting me today. Of course, this is a great honour for me joining you, but you know, of course, I would have preferred to have joined you in person in Latvia. But I think COVID-19 has taught us that we should make the most of technology available to connect and to stay connected. I hope just as we start our conversation with you about Australia, we very much hope to learn more about Latvia and how we can enhance our bilateral commercial links through the Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement. Just a bit about myself. I am an Australian diplomat based in Brussels. My job is unique in that 50% of my time I provide the Australian voice in the crowded Brussels bubble on Australia's interests in the negotiations. Now, for the remaining 50%, I have the pleasure of working with colleagues like the Ambassador and Sarah Kate across our embassies in the EU to talk about Australia's interests and provide a voice in negotiations, but also to talk to Latvian businesses and other businesses or across Europe to understand what you would like to see in the FTA too. Now, I was chosen for this job, and I must say it is one of the best jobs that I've had so far in my career because of my extensive trade policy and negotiation experience. Before coming to Brussels, I worked on Australia's negotiations with Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, all across the Asia Pacific, and most significantly, I worked on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which when the US pulled out later became the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific. Now, except the TPPA, which then resurrected into TPP-11, every negotiation I worked on actually came into force, and I saw through it from the beginning to the successful conclusion and ratification. Now, I'm telling you all this just to say that from the lower levels right up to the highest levels in Australia, we are determined to see through the successful conclusion and entry into force of the Australia-EU FTA. But for that to be achieved, we do need a deal that is comprehensive and ambitious in a mutually beneficial way. And this is precisely what our negotiators have been aiming for since the launch of negotiations in June 2018. And our Prime Minister has made clear the government's aim to see the negotiations conclude in 2020. So I'm sure your immediate question is, how is this possible during COVID times? Sarah Kate, if you could turn to slide 2 for me. Yeah. Yep, thank you. Now, it's true, 2020 was not what any of us were expecting. For all governments around the world, our immediate priority is to save lives. But during these unprecedented times, it's clear that we need effective international cooperation to tackle the global pandemic and this global recession of historic proportions. And I'm pleased to say that amidst this crisis, Australian and EU leaders have reaffirmed their commitment to work together to get out of this crisis. Australian Prime Minister Morrison and European Commission President von der Leyen and Council President Charles Michel talk on a regular basis on the crisis response and effective multilateralism. And at President von der Leyen's hosted international event in May, Prime Minister Morrison pledged €215 million to COVID-19 research and development to work with the EU. We're also pleased to see that in the President's mission letter to the European Union Vice President Dombrovskis, Latvia's former Prime Minister, in adding trade policy to his portfolio, President von der Leyen has instructed him to lead the work on concluding ongoing negotiations with Australia. Next slide, please, Sarah Kate. That's because as we see it, the conclusion of a comprehensive and ambitious Australia-EU FTA is important for both parties. That is because we face the biggest economic challenge in our lifetime. The FTA could make a significant contribution to post-COVID-19 economic recovery. That is by creating new economic and business opportunities and reducing risk in commercial creations. We can also contribute to the EU's goal of diversifying its supply chains by allowing fresh market signals to be sent that bring production online that will assist in reducing EU's dependence on some suppliers. and contribution to the EU's objective of securing supplies of goods which are strategically important and crucial to emergency crisis response. Now, Australia itself is a major market with sound economic fundamentals that is resuming growth, providing opportunities to EU firms to pursue commercial opportunities. OECD, for instance, expects Australia to have the third lowest fall in GDP among all surveyed economies. This would help EU companies to get back on its feet. And also the complementarity of Australian and EU economies means that the FTA poses no threat to economic recovery. Finally, this is a point that was made earlier by the Director General. We have shared values when it comes to our support for multilateralism, and we are partners in pursuing WTO reform. And by concluding a strong free trade agreement, we will again be sending very strong signals on our shared commitment towards multilateralism. And in this uncertain world, we are each trying to strengthen links with reliable partners. Next slide, please, Sarah Kate. Now, just as the Ambassador said, I am really impressed to see so many Latvian businesses have joined us today. And that is because of the potential benefits are quite impressive. Australia's GDP is worth 1.5 trillion American dollars. That is 1.2 trillion euros. We have the 13th largest economy in the world, but with the population of 25 million, we have the smallest population among the G20 countries, making us very wealthy on a per capita basis. We also have a highly advanced economy with an appreciation for high quality products and services. We see that the EU 27, with the population of around 440 million and a collective GDP that places it second largest in the world, significant. So for both Australia and the EU, a comprehensive, ambitious FTA can contribute to prosperity and job creation. Secondly, the potential benefit that I'd like to share with you is that the FTA will create EU companies an opportunity to use Australia as its southern anchor. Again, with reference to previous speakers' comments, we are right in the midst of the Indo-Pacific, which is the fastest region in terms of GDP. It is the engine for growth with a growing middle class. Australia already has strong commercial trade and investment links with these economies through our network of high quality free trade agreements, and including with the TPP 11, as I mentioned before, but also with major economies such as China and Japan and South Korea, as well as, of course, the United States. With our strong administrative and judicial institutions, banking sector and educated population, we provide a familiar base for European companies to do their Asia-Pacific business. Finally, just again reiterating the point that I made earlier, a strong Australia-EU FTA will demonstrate support for international rules-based trading system. Both the EU and Australia are strong supporters of multilateralism. But with the crisis of the WTO, we have not been able to update the rules and agree on new market openings since 1995. Now, back then, the world of commerce looked very different, as you'd agree with me. In fact, the WTO agreement was negotiated by fax machines and in-person meetings. In fact, I hear that they're still using the fax machine in Geneva. But today, as we reflect by this Zoom webinar, we are transacting differently. And those who want to see the rules reflect the reality of today can do so by developing rules according with the view to see them to be the new global standards. Now, you may be wondering at this point, how about Brexit and what does that mean for Australia? Why would Australia want an FTA with the EU without the UK? And you're surely asking the question, aren't most of your trade with Europe destined for the UK market? Well, our analysis show that while the UK in itself is an important market for Australia, and as a matter of fact, an important historic partner for Australia, the EU 27 is still a significant market for us. As a bloc, the EU 27 is Australia's third largest trading partner and third largest services export market, and our third largest source of foreign investment. It is one of our top 10 trading partners whom we do not yet have an FTA in place with. And we are negotiating with the UK too, but those negotiations only commenced in July this year. So they are certainly 2 years behind the Australia-EU negotiations. Next slide, please, Sarah Kate. So by this point, you may be wondering, when are you going to conclude the deal, and what is the status? Well, even during this challenging period, we were able to make progress through holding virtual rounds of negotiations in May and September, holding over almost 60, 70 video conferences over the course of 2.5 weeks in each of these rounds. We want our businesses and industries, as well as farming and regional communities, to be able to leverage the opportunities presented by this FTA at the earliest opportunity. So delivering new trade and investment opportunities will be even more important as we recover from the global pandemic. So what does a comprehensive and ambitious free trade agreement look like from Australia's perspective? The next slide, please. Firstly, improved market access for goods is very important for Australia, as it would be for the EU, as already mentioned. While both Australia and the EU have low tariff rates on an average basis, we both maintain tariff barriers in select goods. Australia, for instance, maintained tariffs on automotives, auto parts, clothing and footwear, agri-food and beverages. The EU goods coming to Australia are subject to those tariffs, but your key competitors from the US, Canada, Japan, Korea, China, Southeast Asian countries, and including even Latin American countries such as Mexico and Chile and Peru that have the FTAs with us, do get to send their goods to Australia on a duty-free basis. Now, this, in practical terms, means that, for instance, only one European car brand is in the top 10 cars sold in Australia, and that is Volkswagen, and it is only number 9. So this is something to bear in mind. And as for Australian interests, we are world's leading exporters of raw materials and agricultural produce, yet the EU maintains barriers in those inputs in final production. On this point, I want to say that the balance of trade is in the EU's favour, as you can see from this slide, and your surplus is growing. That's not to say that we have a problem with that. We don't, as supporters of free trade, open markets and comparative advantage. Sarah Kate, the next slide, please. In fact, even in agri-food trade, the balance is in favour of the EU. According to the European Commission's latest agri-food trade figures, Australia is the 11th largest market for EU agri-food exports. We were the 10th, but now that the UK is considered an external market for you, we have been bumped down to the 10th. Now, this makes sense to us because Australia is a country of European heritage, as had already been mentioned. We even have quite a considerable Latvian diaspora living in Australia who have a taste for European foods and cuisine. That is why, despite being a country that is 50th in terms of population size, we are your 4th top export destination for cheese. While the EU has concluded high-quality trade deals with Asian countries in recent years, it will be a while for Asians to fully acquire the taste for high-quality cheese, for instance. Next slide, please. But what it comes down to is this: the FTA is about diversifying market opportunities for our producers and diversifying sources of goods for our consumers and manufacturers. It's not just about bringing down tariff rates, but it's making trade easier through trade facilitating rules that reflect modern production processes and global value chains. And that is why we want to ensure that the parties can uphold their food safety, health and environmental standards in a way that is science-based and transparent and in line with the WTO agreement. Australia, for instance, exports 2/3 of our export produce, but 70% of our exports go to 10 countries. They are all in the Indo-Pacific. COVID-19, geostrategic competition are all teaching us that it's important to keep finding new markets and providing options to our producers and consumers in a trade facilitating way. Next slide, please. We are also interested in improving our access for services. Services trade is hugely important, and yet barriers are faced. As groups of advanced economies, our respective economies are services based. And 1/3 of Australia's exports to the EU is for services, and 1/4 of the EU's exports to Australia is for services. I'm sure we can do much better in terms of opening up those trade barriers between us and improve competition for our services as better outcomes for our consumers. Thank you. Next slide. And through the FTA, we are exploring how we can bring down those barriers to services trade to create better opportunities, as I mentioned, for our high-earning services professionals and ensure high-quality services for those consumers. We want to explore how we can develop high-quality rules to facilitate digital trade, for instance. As I mentioned before, the world has moved on, and this is a way we are doing business. Most importantly, we want to be able to facilitate mobility of professionals and to see a greater flow of our services trade so as to reflect the makeup of our respective economies. Next slide, please. We also want to facilitate two-way investment. The EU27 is our third top choice source of foreign investment, as I mentioned. And Australia may be an advanced, developed economy, but we're also going through a transition. Just as the EU have the Green Deal and a digital strategy, we are also thriving for a low emissions economy and digitalisation. We need significant investment, both of capital and know-how. Now, as Anthony will talk about, there's considerable opportunities for infrastructure development in Australia as well. Next slide, please. And this already impressive investment relationship can be strengthened further. Now, at this point, I must note that the Latvia-Australia investment story is disappointing, but I very much hope that the FTA will have a positive impact here. Next slide, please. And as with all modern free trade agreements, we also want to see balanced protection and enforcement of intellectual property rights. We are a net importer of intellectual property. One of our most significant imports from the EU is pharmaceuticals, in fact. But we have a world-class universal Medicare system in the world. And while we value innovation, we believe appropriate protections are afforded to the rights holders. We also seek to protect the integrity of our public healthcare sector. Also, we are aware that a deal with the EU would need to include an outcome on geographical indicators. But as a country with European heritage, this is not necessarily an easy issue for us. Nevertheless, we are pragmatic and we very much hope that through the negotiations, we can address this in a mutually acceptable way. Next slide, please. And as the Director General had already mentioned, we want to see a deal that delivers for SMEs. Just as I'm sure it's the case in Latvia, Australian economy is driven by SMEs. And for us, having an FTA that can actually be used by SMEs is very important. So far, Australian SMEs have embraced free trade agreements. And in fact, we have an 80% utilisation rate of our FTAs. We very much hope that we could replicate this in the Australia-EU FTA once it enters into force. We also want to see outcomes in public procurement for both parties, as well as seeing greater development of rules in new areas such as competition and state-owned enterprises. Finally, we want to see how we could better enhance our regulatory cooperation. We already have mutual recognition agreements and conformity assessments on a range of products, such as electromagnetic compatibility, low voltage electrical equipment, pharma goods, and pressure equipment. But we're exploring other areas of regulatory cooperation, such as financial services and other consumer products. Next slide, please. Finally, we do want to see our FTA promote shared values in trade and sustainable development, such as promoting compliance and international labour standards, encouraging responsible business practices, as well as ensure high levels of environmental protection that is consistent with our existing international agreements. We want to also see how the FTA could further enhance our cooperation on mutual interests, such as oceans pollution. Next slide, please. Now, all these issues were pursued in the most recent round, the 8th round that were held in September. As I mentioned before, this round was virtual, and we did manage to cover all 27 chapters. And we did make good progress on our shared objectives of creating better and new opportunities for exporters and investors, demonstrating our ongoing commitment to the rules-based trade as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. This FTA could play a significant role should we be able to achieve a comprehensive and ambitious outcomes. Next slide, please. Now, finally, our work in 2020 has not concluded. We may not be able to conclude the negotiations in itself this year, but we have another round scheduled in early December. Now, I can't promise you anything, and I can't guess what the landing zone may look like, but what we are asking for is for the business community across all EU to show your support for the negotiations so that there will be greater imperative for us to conclude the negotiations as soon as possible. Now, thank you very much for the opportunity to share the latest update in the FTA with you today. Certainly, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Juliana, for that comprehensive overview. And I think it was really great that you're able to draw out the important role of services and also small and medium enterprises and the opportunities for SMEs. So hopefully we can continue the discussion in the Q&A. I'd like to now to turn to another colleague, Anthony Weymouth, Senior Trade Commissioner for Central Europe, covering the Baltics. Anthony is joining us from Sydney this evening. So over to you, Anthony.
Thanks very much, Ambassador, and thanks very much to our Latvian colleagues for organising today's event. Like Juliana, I would have loved to have been in Riga in person to speak with you and to meet with you. But unfortunately, for all the reasons we know only too well, that's not possible at the moment. Just very quickly, my role, basically working for the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, commercially focused, working with Australian companies who are looking to pursue their business interest around the world. I've had the privilege of working in the US, Mexico, Malaysia, Philippines, where else, Germany, and now Central Europe, based in Warsaw, but covering all of Central Europe. We're extremely commercially focused, and from my point of view, really keen to connect Australian companies with companies in Central Europe to do what your businesses like to do, and that's to make money. It's really important for me to help Australian companies, and in your case, Latvian companies, get together and do a good deal. So that's what my focus is. My presentation today is very long. There's a lot of slides, but I'm not going to spend much time on each of the slides because I thought I would prepare a lot of content for you so you can review it afterwards. So there are quite a few words on some of the slides, but please don't worry, I'm not going to read them all word for word, and we're going to go through this fairly quickly. So maybe next slide, please, Sarah Kate. If you can just scroll up a bit, perfect. And so when people think about Australia, this is what many people think about. They think about kangaroos, they think about koalas, they think about beaches, they think about the pristine environment. And the good news is all of that is true. You should think about Australia in those ways. And unfortunately, with COVID-19, our tourism sector can't welcome you at the moment. But I'm sure there's plenty of people listening this evening who have been to Australia and have enjoyed Australian hospitality and seen some of the wonderful sites and our interesting mammals. But what I want you to think about moving forward is Australia in a very different light. And next slide, please, Sarah Kate. So what many people don't know is that Australia is a world-class centre of innovation. And you know, the innovations that Australians have come up with have saved countless lives. And whether we talk about the bionic ear, cancer vaccine, IVF, ResMed, which makes products for sleep apnea, very, very important devices, medical devices that impact people's lives every single day. And these are all inventions that come out of Australia. Next slide, please. I've mentioned the bionic ear. Wi-Fi, all of us working remotely at the moment. I'm working from Sydney at the moment in Australia remotely. And without Wi-Fi, that wouldn't be possible. We scroll to the next slide, please. What I normally like to do when I go to a new city is I use Google Maps. And so I found the office of the Latvian Trade and Investment Agency, and I hope I've got it right, but that's where I should be right now with you, but unfortunately can't at the moment. But if you didn't know, Google Maps, again, is another invention that came out of Australia. It was developed by an Australian. Next slide, please. Some of these demographics you've already seen. We're a small population with a very large landmass. I think it depends how you calculate it, but I think geographically speaking, Australia is probably about 120 times the size of Latvia. So we're a very large landmass, widely dispersed. And if you look at the figures there, 60% of our population only live in 5 cities. So a lot of Australia is basically empty. And as you can also see from that slide, most of us live on the coast, including where I am at the moment in Sydney. We may move to the next slide, please. The economy had unprecedented economic growth over 27 years, and that would have continued had it not have been for COVID-19. But as Julian said, the prospects for the Australian economy are very positive in terms of our recovery. Our stable institutions and our regulatory framework are fundamental to that. And the last point on that slide, Australia welcomes foreign investment. We're an open house. We love new companies and new businesses and people coming to Australia. In fact, the Australian government has just launched a new program to encourage more of the best companies in the world to think about Australia as a location to have an office, to do some of their development work. If we move to the next slide, please. And all I'm trying to say here, there's 21,000 foreign companies with a presence in Australia. And so we'd really like you to come and join them, is my quick message. If we go to the next slide, as the ambassador and as Julian had already mentioned, we are the gateway to Asia. Many Australian companies have grown up in the Asian business environment and are very attuned to how to do business in these culturally diverse locations. And with the set of free trade agreements that basically mean that most products can leave Australia and go into Asia duty-free, Australia is an important consideration or for you as a location to establish as your beachhead as you pursue some of these opportunities in Asia. The stable regulatory environment and the economy provide an excellent platform for you to launch and work with Australian companies to pursue those business opportunities in Asia, working with people who actually have been there and done it. And the growth of the Asian economies is well known, so I don't have to repeat that. But worth thinking about how you could partner with Australia to pursue some of those opportunities. Next slide, please. Two-way trade with the EU is very large, as you can see, but with Latvia, not so much. The two-way trade between Latvia and Australia is fairly even, but I suppose my key message to the business community is there's room to grow, and it really is up to you to think about what you may like to do in Australia. So I encourage you to try and double, triple that two-way trade figure with Australia and Latvia. We can move to the next slide, please. So, and keep going. So I want to talk about some of the opportunities, and I just thought I'd put the Australian map up there just for context. So I mentioned that Australia is quite large, obviously, and as you fly into up the top there, you can see Darwin, across down to Sydney on the east coast, 5 hours on a plane. So we are very geographically dispersed, even when you get to Australia. So coming from Riga, getting on a plane to either Helsinki or Warsaw. Probably the quickest way to get to Australia is via Helsinki or Warsaw. You know, you're looking at your 24 hours, but then the last 5 hours of that are flying over Australia. And the reason that's important is that when the business community and when travel restrictions are lifted, when you're planning your first trip or one of your visits to Australia, and one of the case study speakers later can maybe talk about their experience in doing this, you really have to plan how you're going to spend your time in Australia. It's such a large continent. And New South Wales, as you can see, there are over 7 million people in New South Wales. That figure's probably a little bit out of date, but it may very well be that the best potential way for you to start your business interest in Australia is just focusing on one city, or it may be one state. It may be Victoria, which is a much smaller, geographically diverse in terms of size, but certainly a very large population as well, and also with a very diverse business environment. So you may consider Victoria, New South Wales, or you may try to look at opportunities all around Australia. But that travel question is a really important one for you to think about, because when you're planning your trip to Australia, getting from city to city takes a lot of time. And so if you are going to come, you need to make sure that you've got 2 weeks, or at least would be my recommendation, to commit to really explore and fulfill the obligations that you're hoping to achieve. If we go to the next slide, as Julianne mentioned as well, Australia is basically a construction site at the moment. You can see some of the numbers there: $50 billion in Australian government funding, 15-year major infrastructure plan. If we just go to the next slide, we'll go through that quickly. We've produced this document. The Infrastructure Australia have produced it, and the web link was up there for you, but you'll get that. And this lists all the major infrastructure projects that are happening in Australia right now. The document is about 80 pages long, so there are a lot of high priority projects. And if we just scroll down a little bit, one of them is the Western Sydney Airport project, $5.3 billion project. Now, if you're a Latvian company and you've got anything that goes into an airport, whether it's lighting, heating, whether it's the beautiful wood flooring, IT systems, there is a major new airport being built in Sydney, and you need to be thinking about what your competitive advantage is and why should the Western Sydney Airport Authority consider your product to be included in that project. But it's a huge project. Next slide. This is just a few other examples of major projects that are happening. New South Wales government are also committing very significant funds to infrastructure development. New South Wales is the largest state by population and also by budget. And so if you look at that, that's a very significant budget that they're spending over the next 4 years. And with the COVID situation, I think that will actually increase. So if you're in the infrastructure space in terms of rail, road, airports, as you can see in that diagram, tunnelling, public buildings, you should be really thinking about exploring the opportunities in Australia. Next slide. And here's just a couple of examples of some of those large projects I was talking about that are happening in New South Wales. Everything from cultural centres right through to development of new commercial precincts. Next slide. And this is just to show you the scale. And so if you're an engineering consulting firm, this gives you a view that in 2020, the revenue generated from that industry in Australia was 47 billion Australian dollars. You can see in the pie chart the breakdown of that. So if you're a design consulting engineer, 50% of that $47 billion is being spent on those services. So again, worth thinking about. Next slide, please. And if you're in construction, if you're actually building, or if you've got building products for the construction industry, and I know that Latvia does, these are some of the examples of where that money is being spent. $423 billion per annum. You can see residential construction occupies 26% of that, and heavy industry and civil engineering is about 20% of that. We go down to the next slide, Sarah Kate. Whereas the domestic housing market in Australia, $56 billion per year. And again, with the COVID situation, the Australian government, through their economic measures, has released additional funds and support to enable more people in Australia to build homes. And so we can only see these figures increasing. On to the next slide. And there's just a snapshot of the prefabricated wooden building market in Australia. I know that quite a few Baltic countries do have excellent kit homes and prefabricated housing. So if we go to the next slide. That was just a very quick overview of what's happening in infrastructure. If we move on to defence now, the Australian government has committed $200 billion over the next 10 years to upgrade and modernise our defence platforms, both air, land and sea. As you can see in that slide, the Royal Australian Navy C-1000 Future Submarine Program, total estimated cost of $50 billion. If we go to the next slide, just leave it there for a second. And then, yeah, thank you. You can see Lucerne there as well. They've been awarded the contract for 12 new offshore patrol boats. And you can also see that BA Systems out of the UK have been awarded a contract to build anti-submarine frigates. Now, the reason that, so Naval Group, Lucerne in Germany, BAE Systems in the UK, if you're doing business with any of those firms, if you're supplying in the supply chain of any of those organisations, the contracts that they've just won in Australia are enormous. And under the Australian Defence Modernisation Program, the catch is that those companies have to build those projects or complete those projects in Australia. So there's opportunities for you to bring your supply chain into those projects in Australia. If we go to the next slide, please. And each of the projects has all of the information available on dedicated websites. So that's just an example. That's the C-1000, the new submarine website. And it's important to note that when the Australian Defence Force went to tender for the new submarines, we're looking for something that doesn't exist at the moment. We're looking for new ideas. We're looking for solutions that haven't been solved yet. And so we're looking for innovation and technology that maybe your company can offer to the Naval Group who has been awarded that contract. So if you're interested in those programs, please make the most of those websites and resources that are available. Next slide, please. That just shows you a quick overview of the current defence spending. So this is not the new program spending, the $200 billion. This is just sustaining our Defence Force in Australia as it currently stands. So about $38 billion to do that per annum. And you can see the breakup of what that money is spent on. We go to the next slide. So that was defence. Moving on to resources and energy, as previous speakers have already mentioned, Australia is a powerhouse when it comes to the resources and energy sector. 10% of our GDP comes from the resources sector. We've been mining for many, many years, hundreds of years, in fact, and it's a very important industry for Australia's future. But most of the time, these companies are operating in very remote, harsh environments, and they're looking for new solutions on how to deal with that. For example, in Western Australia now, there are trains that are kilometres long that carry the product from the mines to the ports to be exported overseas that are driverless. And those driverless trains are going hundreds and hundreds of kilometres, travelling for 12 hours, taking the product from the mine to the wharf, and so it can be loaded and exported. So the mining industry is open to new ideas, solutions to help them maintain their profitability, but also to help them become even more environmentally friendly than they already are. If we go to the next slide, please. This just shows you a breakdown of the commodities. I won't go through that in any detail, so next slide. If you're a company who wants to do business with the mining sector in Australia, there's the size of the industry, $280 billion they spend every year on products and services. So if you're a company that makes equipment or provides services to the mining industry, you really should be thinking about the opportunity to do that in Australia. Next slide, please. As Julianne also mentioned, we have quite a high standard of living in Australia with a population that demands quality products. Many Australians are from overseas, and we're used to having wonderful things from overseas. We actually love it. And so my wife is, her father is from Madrid, so she's half Spanish. We love buying European things, and I think most Australians do. And so there is great opportunities for a wide range of unique, interesting consumer products. If we go to the next slide, please. This just shows you a breakdown of consumer retailing in Australia. Household goods dominate 40%, but about $170 billion per annum. So it's a very large opportunity, and I'll show you a couple of the segments if we keep going down to the next slide. Supermarkets and grocery stores, $100 billion on groceries every year, 110. You can see the breakdown there. Again, you'll get these slides afterwards, so I'm not going to speak through the detail. If we go to the next slide. Furniture retailing, I know that quite a few companies from Latvia make wonderful furniture, and here's a breakdown of the furniture retailing sector in Australia, nearly $8 billion per year. So lounges and dining room account for nearly 50%, bedroom furniture 30%. And if we scroll down to the next slide, you can see floor coverings. Importantly, vinyl and timber occupy about 30% of that total 3 billion market. So 1 billion in flooring products. And I know that there's definitely flooring products coming out of the Baltics and also Latvia. So the consumer market in Australia is definitely worth considering. Some of the questions that were asked when people registered for the event was, how do I enter the market? How do I actually sell my products, say, to supermarkets in Australia? The reality is that the Australian supermarket scene is quite easy to understand. There's not a lot of key players. There's three key retailers who basically dominate, two who are probably the most dominant, and then a third that's come on stream fairly recently. So in terms of the potential customers that you're selling your food or beverage products to, the main retailers, there's not that many to target, but they're very, very price sensitive and tough to do business with. And that's why if you go to the next slide, particularly if you've got consumer products, with COVID, but even before COVID, and I think these numbers will increase dramatically. You can see that in 2019, Australians spent about 28 billion per annum buying stuff off the internet via e-commerce channels. By next year, that was forecast to grow to 35 billion. I guarantee that that's going to be much larger than that by the end of 2021. And we are seeing a very significant increase in B2C transactions in Australia. And the most important thing for you, if you are interested in pursuing B2C transactions, is to really seriously think about your distribution channel. There are definitely fulfillment houses, both to drive for non-perishable products, but also fulfillment houses who can offer services for refrigerated or product that needs to be frozen. That can then be picked and packed and sent from directly to the customer in Australia. But I think one of the keys to success in tackling that market is about speed of delivery, and with the airline industry the way it is at the moment, with so many flights grounded around the world, having some sort of warehousing facility so you can do your e-commerce deliveries really quick to your consumers, I think will put you in a really strong position. But definitely a very important channel to consider. If we go to the next slide. This is just a couple of screenshots from our website, and doing business with Australia. There's a host of information available, right from how to setting up a company, getting an ABN. So we can just go to the next slide. So there's a whole section on setting up a business in Australia if you do want to set up a business in Australia, and it's really cheap to set up an Australian business. I think it's about $100 to get an ABN. So registering a business is very easy. You can do it online. But the most important thing to do when you're thinking about setting up a business is to make sure you get the structure right. And so even though it's simple to do it online and just register your Australian business number and then you've got your business set up, I would still encourage you to think about seeking professional advice from a tax consultant or a law firm to help you make sure you structure your business in the best possible way that enables you to maximize your returns. But there's a lot of information available on our website, so I encourage you to visit it. Next slide, please. And we're going to start where we finished. So at the end of the day, I really do encourage you to enjoy the wonderful natural beauty of Australia, our unique animals. But if we go to the next slide, my final slide, I really want to leave you with the message that when you think about Australia, you really should be thinking about innovation and thinking about a country that is committed to solving the problems that the world is facing. And many of those are our own problems, and we need help to do that. And collaboration between universities is something that we do on a very regular basis. So there are opportunities to do research and development between institutions. And so if you're a university in the audience and you're keen to do joint R&D, I'm sure there are potential partners in Australia to do that with. And my final comment, if we go to the last slide. So it's up to you, is all I'm trying to say in that last message. But thank you very much, everybody, and thanks, Ambassador, for allowing me to share some thoughts with the colleagues and with the Latvian business community.
Thanks very much, Anthony, for that comprehensive overview, but also for making all that information available in the slides that participants can draw upon. And I think the websites that you provided links to do provide many answers to many of the questions that we've received. For the final session of our webinar, I'd like to turn to our Latvian business colleagues. So from Latvijas Finieris, Mr. Martins Latsits, over to you. Look forward to hearing about your experience.
Okay, labrīt Latvija. Good morning Stockholm, Brussels. Good evening Sydney. So I'll try to share my presentation. Okay. Let's go to the beginning and okay, so Ambassador, colleagues, friends, this will be our findings, experience, and feelings about Australia, which might be all 100% true, but well, that's how we feel about so far what we are doing there. So very shortly about Latvijas Finieris. So birch plywood is our core business. We are really export-oriented country, so the Baltics or Northern Europe is really rich with the forests, and that we do. We send around the world. We have owned 12 sales offices across the world, so 9 in Europe, 1 in Turkey, 1 in North America, 1 in Japan. We have not became from Latvian company to quite international. We have production sites in Lithuania, Estonia, and Finland as well. And turnover is 230 million, so per annum. Sales to Oceania, so Australia 0.3%, New Zealand 4 times more, 1.2%. We are not based in not in Australia, not in New Zealand, so we do straight business with our customers, so we deliver to them. So we have not really experienced how to do business locally. So, but we share some experience how to find the partners there. our products, birch plywood, goes really to very industrial applications, starting from LNG, liquid natural gas carriers, heavy transportation, train floorings, parquet, concrete shuttering frame systems, some interior designs, some light transportation vehicles. So we really need a B2B customers at the end. So and in consumer customers are quite a real case that our plywood goes there. So land down under. So this is a map from perspective Australia. So and you don't see a match of other lands. Let's say a slight grip of Asia and New Zealand as well, and Antarctica. So it is a large country, so as I mentioned before. So we found out some Australians may not say so, and why it is so. It's compared to Latvia, it is 25 million. It's a 10 times bigger country by population, but all is relative. So as Australians compare them with the neighbors, which are Malaysia, Indonesia, India, China, Philippines, Korea, Japan, and there are much larger number of populations. So territory is big, yeah, you have to travel quite a lot to reach all your destinations. And forests, you see that, imagine, but it is 40 times bigger than in Latvia, actually, so by territory. Just one comment, yeah, I received questions also from other participants, so I'll try to answer part of them, so within my presentation. It is far away as well from Latvia, 24 hours flight, as it was mentioned. To air freight, let's say from our experience, goods, maybe due to the size of our product, so 2 days, maybe even 3 days, it takes time when it's to be delivered. The container, 6 to 8 weeks, depending on which coast you are delivering. So it is maybe 2, maybe less, even 5 weeks, 5-6 weeks to the western coast, to Perth, or 8 weeks to Melbourne or Sydney. So, and it's not an easy way. It is also 2 transshipments from Riga. So sometimes one in Europe, either Rotterdam or Hamburg, and then one in most likely in Singapore. So, and time difference is 6 hours with Sydney. So yeah, it is actually 7 p.m. in Sydney. So which makes even if the tools like Zoom or Teams provide us live, or you can call it so by phone, but it's still that should be taken in account, so that of the office hours and so on. Australia, it's a Western culture, it's British traditions with different influences. I was positively surprised that it's local cultures before Western people arrived there, so influences from Oceania, other regions, Asia, other European countries. So it's really multinational, and still the people are holding, let's say in a business we see this is a British tradition. If you are fine with British culture going to business, so that's Australia should not be a problem with you. So friendly, communicative people, always good to have a small chat talk, are helpful to solve your problems. And Australians love nature, good food, wine, sports, healthy style of the living. Some surprises which you have find there. So koala, kangaroo, Yarawale, koala, yes, fine nature. Kangaroo, yes, again nature. But I was a bit surprised being in restaurant in Melbourne. So they on the menu was our steak of our lovely wallaby with a potato puree. So that was a bit shock. That's the first, but we all in Latvia actually are very commonly we can get tartar from ostrich, so it's fine. Well, if you are entertainment or leisure or very similar tourism business, so that the sports are very important. And so the second line, a try, over, and handballs, that really stands for 3 major sports in Australia, for respectively for rugby, cricket, and Australian football. So, and those are quite the drivers for that Australians in their life, and so probably you can hear expressions, so which means completely different and coming from sports. Be prepared for that. Protection of local environment. So this is also one of the key issues in Australia. So it may influence to deal with exports of food, timber, other, so what might have some live or some other issues connected with that. So there are quite a strict rules. For instance, in our case, when we ship wood products, so we do our container fumigation in harbors of Riga, so that there are no any insects or bugs or whatever are able to travel to Australia. Visiting country is really is recommended. So just to feel how it is, to atmosphere, if that Australia is really together with your values, your thinking. So and well, this is quite important, I should say. Business environment. It is industrial developed very country, as it was mentioned by Anthony, and in business, it's a straightforward communication. Fast information exchange is expected, nevertheless, of the time differences, so you have to be prepared for that. From business point of view, so as you see the map of Australia, so the business traditions or activities are actually quite different in Victoria or New South Wales or South Australia or Queensland. So it is really as advised, it is a big country, it's different traditions, different activities. So it's better to do the homework, to investigate which could be the best place to start in Australia. So. Australian, New Zealand standards, yeah, they are common for both countries. They are different from Europe. So certification, this is a case where that it's really needed. Those certification possibilities are not so well, at least in our experience, represented in Europe. So to test your products, especially for the building industry, so as where one of the major part of our products is going, so it should be done in Australia, or you should have invest in some equipment here locally. So. Which also one is issues is that it's a trade union, so in which is comes to our experience. So if our product is not certified according to that needed standard, so it could be also denied handled by the workers if they are members of trade unions, so it's of uncertified products due to really health and safety issues. So this is should be taken into mind. So and also health and safety issues, either it is a different products, consumer products, so this is also to be very good care taken of. What to offer to Australia? So yeah, limited or not available locally. Very easy to say. In our case, yeah, a lot of forest there. There is sawmilling to produce the sawn timbers. There is a plywood production as well in Australia. Yeah, what we offer, so we offer a birch plywood made out of the birch plywood, which is not available locally. So it's have a certain capability, strength properties. That's how we started and delivered. What we can offer, let's say, on a top of maybe of the local, or let's say the major suppliers from Southeast Asia, this is sustainability. So it's a certification of chain of custody of supply of the timber, service, long-standing partnership. So LVL, laminated vinyl lumber, so that's also not a product produced in Australia. So that's what European companies are also selling a lot to Australia. It's just because there's locally, it's not available as the product. So on other hand, so innovations are very welcome. Just the new ones are also for traditional things, as it was also mentioned. So there's also a good opportunity to provide products from Latvia. Unique design, this is another issue. So maybe still the product is very traditional, but you provide it with new look, new values to the consumers or users. So that could be also a very good one. Price quality ratio. This is well, if you are willing to say, okay, Australia is industrial developed country, so probably we can offer a better cost solution. So bear in mind that much closer are Malaysia, Indonesia, China, India. So, and they could be very cost efficient. So it should be not really a straightforward sales argument as a price from Latvia. On the other hand, so if you are offering a good product, unique, so yeah, you can get a very good sales price for it. And again, that the price quality ratios from our experience are quite different. Let's say between which we are using internally. So Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane. So Melbourne, so they're more looking into the design issues, high values, innovations, and sustainability. So customers in New South Wales, Sydney, so they are more, to be more price driven. Of course, other aspects are more important. And from our experience, so Brisbane customers, they're looking for as a more industrial part. So they're more looking for performance and durability of products. So again, for your industry, you should a bit look into the different markets and their demands to start. So our own activities sounds quite complicated with Australia. So we started with New Zealand, 2004, but we were approached by the customer from there, and they were looking for, let's say, products of European origin, where the sustainability, innovation is key drivers for it. It was quite a slow start, actually. First 7 years, 100,000, 300,000 turnover, so depending from the one year to another. It was also because that there is a distance, that the shipment time is even to New Zealand is even longer, even up to 10 weeks. It's a testing period. So while the customer tests a product and then another trial and upgrade, so it takes quite a lot of time. So, but once you prove that you are a good supplier, you are based for long-term relationships, so that, as you see, the 2016, 1.2 million, 2019, 2.2 million, it was quite a sharp turnover increase. So once you prove it's a good product, customers are, or let's say market accepted as a birch plywood as a good solution for their needs. Meetings, yeah, that's important. So our New Zealand customers or friends, let's say, they were coming to Europe once per year for at least 4 to 5, 6 traveling to trying to meet all their suppliers across Europe to look to see what's new. They were visiting different trade shows, which is not the case actually, unfortunately at the moment, but so they were more looking what's new in Europe, what we can offer. They were coming to Riga as well, and if they come to Riga, so the Riga was the first stop in Europe. So and sometimes we met as well. We were traveling to Germany when they were not coming to Riga. But well, those meetings were quite important. So, and I have been personally twice in New Zealand, but that was in the later stages of our cooperation. Australia, yeah, that is a more difficult or more slowly for us. So that 2012, roughly 100,000 euros turnover, which was 5 times more in 7 years, roughly half a million. But it is more. We did sales through our partners in New Zealand, Germany, Austria, Turkey, because they have a local activities there. They already investigated what are the needs, and it was even more helpful for us to supply a product, so which is mainly in cooperation with those companies based in New Zealand, Germany, Austria, and Turkey, which is also a good approach. And of course, one local company. So, and I based in Melbourne, Victoria. So they also approached us. It was kind of very slow start while I was not really no one from our company been to visit them. And I was really happy to be there in 2015, and there was a group of Latvian entrepreneurs were there. So, and this was organized by Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Her Excellency Ambassador Andris Teikmanis, who was ambassador in UK of Latvia, Republic of Latvia in UK, Australia, and New Zealand, and of course by Latvian Investment and Development Agency. So it was a group. It gave an opportunity to be there, to be in contact with local organizations. If you had some potential customers, so you were there. So I organized 3 meetings independently, so outside of the program. So, but at least the one was good, and we still we continue cooperation. So. How we deliver goods, as I mentioned, still shipments by the containers. It's a CIF terms, so that as a supplier we take care of delivering goods to the customer. So payment terms. So is that Australian customers are reliable ones? Well, there is a saying in Germany, so always the best restaurant in the city is Italian restaurant, but not every Italian restaurant is a top one. So you have to be careful and as much as possible to get your information about your customers. But actually, we are enjoying that cash against document payment terms. So due to the quite a long shipment time, so that in practice it means when we send out the goods, we send out the goods, so we issue an invoice, and just shortly before that container arrives in Australia or New Zealand, so the customer transfers the money, and we send out the documents, so the customer can pick up a container. So yeah, there is a risk for sure. So if the customer not paying, so your goods are still yours, but they are based somewhere in harbor of Sydney or Melbourne or Perth. So that's why you should still do some kind of pre-investigation of your partners and advise, let's say, maybe different rating agencies or for evaluation, or even credit insurance. Yeah, so in a nutshell, it is quite a distance and a time distance as well. You have to be in a contact to prove that you are a sustainable partner, and this takes a bit of time, but if you do well, so there is a success. And well, once you establish there, so it's as solid as a harbor bridge in Sydney, so and you are good partners, and you can develop your business together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Martins, for that very useful presentation, which I'm sure will be of value to participants who are interested in entering the Australian market. So we've gone a bit over time, I think, because we are trying to cover a lot, but I'd like to invite the final speaker, Mr. Ugus Honavko from SAF Tehnika, to offer your perspective. If you can try and be quite brief, Ugus, and then I'll make some short wrap-up comments, but just wanted to stress to everyone that we want to stay engaged after this webinar also, and follow up with your individual questions where that's useful. So over to you, Ugus.
Thank you, Bernard. I will try to be as short as possible, yet informative as possible as well, so each of the participants gets some use of my speech. So I'm sharing the screen of my short presentation. Let me put it on the full screen mode. So I hope you all see the screen of my presentation. So yes, hello everyone. I'm glad to see and hear so many participants and panelists. My name is Uģis Soņavko. I'm responsible sales director for Asia Pacific region at one of the leading telecommunication companies in Latvia called SAF Tehnika. Just the small key facts of our business in Australia as well in New Zealand, because we usually don't divide those two markets. We are in Australia and New Zealand markets since 2009, so it's quite extensive history already. Currently, we have annual revenue, direct annual revenue, I would say about 400 to 600k euros. Yet there are customers that are actually doing their operations outside of Australia but are based in Australia. So I would say that indirect export to Australian companies are much larger for our business currently. Yet those businesses include not just B2B customers that are common, but we do partner with the government agencies, with the local councils, as well with the military industry, with the Australian Army forces of different divisions. So our telecommunication equipment is used quite widely in Australia and New Zealand currently. And I would say this is like just the supplement of what Martin already said, that our main business lies on our partners that are doing actually business locally in Australia, because of course we are not a registered company in Australia, and we particularly rely on our partners and our customers that are locally based in this wonderful continent and country. Currently, we do have about 5 to 7 active partners, as well some of direct customers that we are dealing with, which generates that mentioned revenue. And of course, mainly those are telecom related companies that are whether providing the connection for companies, for private parties, and so on. As well, those are councils and state agencies that are simply providing connection, for example, for schools, hospitals, any other applications where there is a need for high data rates of data transmission, of wireless data transmission. So this is our key products we are doing. Just a slight overview of actually what is SAF Tehnika doing. It's our core business is point-to-point microwave data transmission equipment, which is basically, I would say, data transmission without the wires. If we talk more pop science language. As well, we do have 2 other business divisions that are focusing in spectrum analyzers. That basically is a tool, is a supplement to that point-to-point microwave industry. So it's basically a good help for those who are actually working with our equipment or with other vendors' equipment of similar use. And as well, the third business division that we have and established recently is so-called IoT products, Internet of Things products, currently produced and sold under ARANET name. I assume some of panelists and maybe some participants of this webinar already have heard about our ARANET 4 product, which is basically indoor environment monitoring device that monitors how well environment you are currently sitting, and whether it would be good to open the window and have a fresh breeze of air to put away your polluted air inside of the room, and probably avoid some unnecessary risks during this very unpleasant pandemic time of COVID-19 as well. So this is what we are doing. We are doing our business in Australia, I would say on daily basis. We do ship our goods to Australia every week. And I would say we have been extremely lucky because our equipment is not related to any additional customs charges or taxes. So for our partners to do business, at least in telecom industry, to have our equipment from European Union to Australia does not involve any additional charges, does not involve any additional, I would say, business restrictions that they need to overcome to simply deal and make a business with us. So we have been extremely lucky in this point of view. As well, I would say, yet as it was mentioned already in Martin's presentation, Australia is a country yet divided in several states, and it not might be so straightforward and absolutely 100% applicable to every of the states. So it depends really from each of the states' government. There might be some differences in the rules and restrictions and terms and conditions and so on. So I would say again, my core message to everyone who is willing to do business in Australia is to really find a strong partner that is basically the core key of the market. If you are not willing to establish your own company in Australia, but deal with the Australian market with help of the partners, with distributors or resellers of your goods. So this is probably the key factor of simply being in contact with the person who is trusting your product at first, who likes your product, as well, who simply knows the market and simply are confident of doing business as such in Australia or in New Zealand or both. So that would be my main suggestions here. As well, I would say information on how to do business, what restrictions and terms applies to do business to, for example, export some certain goods or services to Australia is quite, I would say, finding the information about those rules and conditions is not so extremely hard, I would say that. And if you're really willing to do business, I would say it's fairly easy to understand what might be applied to your goods, what rules might be applied to your goods once you are exporting them to Australian market. So as well, of course, now there is traveling restrictions to Australia, but I would say, at least in our business, it's extremely important of being close to our customers and visit them time by time, to simply show them that they are important to us as well. Sometimes a conversation face-to-face gives us opportunity to get to deeper roots of some issues, of some problems the partners might experience, and in some cases simply help them better and serve them better as our partners, as our cooperation strongholds of being in that particular market. So I really hope that the situation with the virus pandemic will change but of course it's just a prediction. But really, for some companies, as I've seen already in Q&A, there was a company interested in travel to Australia because they need to send their team to set up the goods that they are selling to Australian market. I think this is very similar to our industry, to telecom industry. There are some cases where we really need to travel, not just for sales purposes, but for engineering purposes, for support purposes on field. So yeah, let's hope for the best that the situation is changing. As well, in our business, it's very important, and I might say that it's important for some small or medium companies that are exporting not a large amount of the goods in terms of weight, but well, high value goods, but with the low weight, that might be better to ship by air, not by ships, by sea freight. Currently, there are many of restrictions related to courier services that are working in Australia. So not all of them are available in terms of the services. So for example, I can mention that for many months, there is no FedEx economy service available for our customers to ship our goods by air. It's just FedEx priority. Well, unless you don't have an extremely good relationship with your courier account manager, of course, you can might stumble upon a very high cost of shipping those goods actually to Australia. But well, that's a very specific situation currently. I would say it will not stay like that for all the time, that's for sure. So the industry will adjust, but if there is something you wish to ship now in extremely near future, you might get towards some of restrictions and some of option cutouts of actually good courier service. So that's the current situation with Australia, at least from our experience. Thank you. If there are any questions, please do not hesitate to ask them.
Well, thanks very much, Ugus, for that perspective. And it was encouraging, I think, to hear from both of the companies this morning that Australia is a good place to do business, and that that in many ways it is quite straightforward to do so, but particularly if you're able to build strong partnerships. I think the discussion does reinforce to me the importance of working together on an ambitious free trade agreement so that we can make it even easier and reduce those barriers further. I did want to finally mention, because this is a question that has come up in the chat room and a bit in the discussion about the fact that Australia has border restrictions at the moment. As Ugus mentioned, we very much hope that they will be able to be lifted when the health situation allows. And we do appreciate that it is having some real world impacts on business activity. I'd encourage you to essentially read the information provided online by the Australian authorities about your ability to travel to Australia, because there is some scope to do so. I'd also encourage you to get in contact with the Australian Embassy here in Stockholm if you do have a particular situation. Whilst we can't guarantee that we'll be able to open up access, we can certainly discuss options with you and sometimes intervene with our Department of Home Affairs to bring it to their attention and see if there's a pathway forward. And we have been able to support several companies in this way in the recent period. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again to everyone for participating. I see we have gone somewhat over time, but looking down at the list of participants, we've still had very strong participation. I very much encourage you to draw on the resources that colleagues have included in their presentations. Particularly note those very useful links in Anthony's presentations, but don't hesitate to reach out to to the Australian Embassy, to the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, Austrade. And as opportunities allow, I can't wait to get back to your beautiful country and meet with some of you in person. Finally, thanks very much to colleagues, Gunnars in the Latvian Chamber of Commerce, Agnesi and Phillips in the Latvian Investment and Development Agency, Katrina in the Foreign Ministry, and my colleague here, Sarah Kate, in Stockholm for pulling together this great conversation. And I hope we can reconnect again soon. Thanks very much, everyone.